Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Monday Night Review. The reason I sound so excited is that this was supposed to be episode 21 and the amazing computer geeks at my local shop managed to get everything off my old computer onto a hard drive. Hurrah! So all the work I did on this episode was sort of recovered, though some of it turns out, I hadn't saved. But the bare bones of it was there. So hopefully I'll remember the bits that aren't. But I was reading a book a couple of weeks ago and it mentioned something which keeps popping up in my life at the moment with either references or stuff that I'm reading. So I thought rather than doing all of these stories individually, which would make pretty short episodes, I'd do them all in one go. So today we're going to talk about black dogs in folklore. Now, when I use the term black dog, it's usually in reference to depression. It's an expression used by many, including Winston Churchill. And I think it works perfectly as a way to describe depression. But black dogs have their own place in folklore, often as omens of death or a portent of something terrible about to happen. For some, they believe it's like a physical incarnation of the devil or a hellhound. They're often described as having glowing or red or burning eyes, and these are associated with specific places and occurrences. Sometimes they will appear before or during electrical storms, at crossroads, ancient pathways, or places of execution seem to be really popular. We're going to focus on the black dogs in English folklore, though they're not limited to just here. Actually, I say English, I should say British folklore. There's dogs throughout European mythology that are associated with death. Think of Cerberus in Greek mythology. And this is probably due to their scavenging behaviour. They in Scotland are particularly linked to the eating of corpses after a war. And I suspect it may also be down to their loyalty to whoever their master might be, whether they're good or evil. So if we wanted to do black dogs by county, we could, and we sort of are. There's only two that are lacking any stories, two counties in England. And that's Middlesex and Rutland, and I'd argue that both of those have been sort of absorbed into other areas anyway. As a side note, I would say that if you're getting a puppy and it's black, have a look at some of the black dogs from folklore names, as they are great. Though if you believe in nominative determinism, maybe don't do that, because I have a black dog called Loki, after the god of mischief and misrule. And he's quite the handful. So, this is also something of which I have a bit of personal knowledge. Not that I've ever come across one of these beasts that we're going to talk about today. Although, as I said, I do have my own black dog called Loki, who we do call Loki the devil dog, as anyone who's ever owned a Patterdale may understand. But my father-in-law grew up in Norfolk and would tell us stories of Black Shuk, who roams Norfolk and Suffolk and even parts of Essex. So I'm going to tell you that story later on. So we're going to hear about some specific dogs in the counties from whence they hail, but also some more general kind of black dogs in folklore. For example, the Guy Trash is a black dog and death omen that's basically all over northern England. It haunts solitary pathways and also sometimes takes the form of a horse, a mule, or a cow. It's popularised in folklore by its mention in the novel by Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, who was from Haworth up in Yorkshire, and also in lots of works of fiction there is mention of black dogs. For example, in Dracula at one point in Whitby takes the form of a black dog. So it's sometimes unknown as to whether that's what started the rumour of a black dog, or whether that's what gave the idea for the black dog, if that makes sense. So we're going to go in alphabetical order of some of my favourite ones, or some that I feel are worth a mention. So in Bedfordshire first, Galley Hill in Luton, it's been haunted by a black dog ever since a storm set the gibbet alight sometime in the 16th or 17th century. A gibbet is where you execute people. In ancient times, Galley Hill was home to a hill fort and barrow, and later in the 16th and 17th century it became a place of execution and a gallows was erected. It's a high, visible landmark where witches and criminals were executed and their bodies covered in tar to preserve them, and then they were left to hang on the gallows as a sort of warning to others before they were eventually taken down and buried. And then one night the hill was hit by a ferocious storm and the gallows were struck by lightning, setting it and the ground around it on fire. And in the flames, a black dog was said to have been seen howling and capering wildly, and people believe that the beast comes for the souls of the criminals and witches, driving them through the gates of hell for Satan. So, story one, and you can see that they're associated with storms, Satan being a kind of servant for Satan, all of that. So then to Buckinghamshire, a man who lived in a village near Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire would go each morning to milk his cows who were in a distant field, and then one night he encountered a sinister black dog, and every night thereafter he would see this dog. And then he brought a friend along with him, and the dog appeared again, and he attacked it using the yoke of his milk pails as a weapon, so the bit of wood in between the pails of milk. And when he did so, the dog vanished, but the yoke went through the dog and struck the ground, and he full senseless to the ground. He's carried home by his friend, and he remained speechless and paralytic for the rest of his life. He never regained sanity. So Cornwall, if we could do a whole episode on the different spooky tales of Cornwall, but it has its own fair share of black dogs. The black dog apparently haunts the main road between Bodmin and Launceston, which is an area more famously known for the Beast of Bodmin, perhaps, and Jamaica Inn. And in the parish of St. Teith, there are sightings of a ghostly pack of dogs known as Cheney hounds that once belonged to an old squire named Cheney. It's uncertain how the dogs died, but it says that they're sometimes seen or heard in rough weather. Dando's dogs, also known as devil's dandy dogs, are mythical creatures from English folklore. They're the hounds that take part in a wild hunt, also in Cornwall. It basically stems from this legend of a sinful priest named Dando, who was a big huntsman. And after a Sunday hunt one day, he drinks all the booze that he can get his hands on, and he calls for more. And he exclaims that if the drink he wants cannot be found on earth, then he'll go to hell for it. And then a strange huntsman comes forward and offers him a drink, but seizes some of Dando's game from the hunt. And the drunken Dando tries to stop him, shouting, "I'll go to hell after them, but I'll get them from thee." In another version, the strange huntsman offers Dando a flask, and Dando drinks it but wants more and says, "I'll gallop to hell for more." But in both versions, this mysterious huntsman whisks him away to hell. And Dando's dogs give a futile chase. And so early on Sunday mornings, Dando's dogs can be heard either pursuing game or searching for their lost master. In Devon, Squire Richard Cable of Buckfastleigh, on the southern edge of Dartmoor in Devon, was an evil man who loved to hunt and allegedly murdered his wife, although lots of people say that she was mentioned in his will, but I mean, that doesn't mean he didn't bump her off before. He's actually believed to be the inspiration for the villainous Hugo Baskerville in Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles. And when Cable died, it was said that a pack of black hounds would rush across the moor to his grave, and his ghost would be seen out hunting with them across the moor. And it apparently got so bad that locals put an extra heavy slab across his grave, and apparently built a pyramid-shaped mausoleum with metal railings to keep him in. However, that was a place of burial for lots of his ancestors who were in the mausoleum before he died, so that's unlikely, but he does have an extra heavy slab across his grave. The Yeath Hound or Yell Hound is another dog from Devon folklore, and it's supposed to be a headless dog, said to be the spirit of an unbaptized child, and it rambles through the woods at night making wailing noises. It may also have been an inspiration. It's in a lot of folklore stories, and it may also be the inspiration for the Hound of the Baskervilles. There's also the wish hounds. So wish here is a dialect word for ghostly or haunted, though Robert Hunt defines it as a sort of common term that's often used to mean a weird sorrow that's associated with mysterious causes. Anyway, they kind of believe that this is identical to the Yeath hounds, but Wistman's Wood in Dartmoor is said to be the home of the wish hounds, and they make their hunting forays across the moor and up a road called the Abbot's Way. Their huntsman is thought to be the devil, and is said that any dog who hears the crying of the hounds will die. One legend states that the ghost of Sir Francis Drake sometimes drives a black hearse coach on the road between Tavistock and Plymouth at night, drawn by headless horsemen and accompanied by demons and a pack of headless yelping hounds. He was famous for being a fan of the occult, so it's believed that this is kind of a story as his payback for his sacrilegious ways. So now we're off to Dorset. Near the town of Lyme Regis, a farmhouse was supposedly haunted by a black dog. It never caused any harm, but one night the master of the house got into a drunken rage, tried to attack it with an iron poker, and the dog fled to the attic, where it leapt out through the ceiling, and when the master struck the spot where the dog vanished, he discovered a hidden cache of gold and silver. The dog was never seen again indoors, though it's said to still haunt the road to this day. And the lane is called Hay Lane, but some people call it Dog Lane. Dogs who are allowed to stray in this area late at night have often mysteriously disappeared, though, the rate of dog thieves in this country is absolutely horrendous, so that could be something to do with it. And there's still a bed and breakfast in Lyme Regis called the Old Black Dog, and part of this legend states that when the drunk man finds his treasure, he goes and he buys an inn down the road, and that is the Old Black Dog. So on the Isle of Guernsey, there's numerous unnamed black dogs, and they're all associated with place names derived from the word beast. Some are said to trail chains behind them. The most famous lives on Tower Hill and is never seen, it's only heard, but you can see a headless dog near Ville-au-Roi, and is believed to be the ghost of a bailiff, Gautier de la Salle, who's said to be wicked and was hanged in 1320 and returns as the ghost of a headless dog. In Le Bourg, in the forest, a large dog is said to have followed a man all the way home, and the man died the next day. In Hampshire, I had to include this as a Hampshire girl, black dog is seen near Twyford, but there's absolutely no evidence of this I can find on the internet anywhere. There's just lots and lots of people going, a black dog has often been seen near Twyford, but that's it. In Hertfordshire, a chimney sweep named Thomas Coley was executed by hanging in 1751 for the drowning murder of Ruth Osborne, who he accused of being a witch. He rallied a mob, went to the workhouse, took Ruth and her husband John and charged them with witchcraft. Ruth was put on the ducking stool, and then eventually it turns out she wasn't drowning quick enough for Coley. So he held her head underwater with a stick. He was rightfully tried for murder and executed, and it's now believed that his spirit haunts the site of the gibbet in the form of a black dog, and you can hear the clanking of chains. In one tale, a pair of men who encountered the dog saw a burst of flame before it appeared in front of them. They said it's as big as a Newfoundland with the usual burning eyes and long sharp teeth, and then it disappeared after a few minutes, and it's either supposed to vanish like a shadow or sink into the earth. The Isle of Man has the legend of Modidu, which means black dog in Manx, and is said to haunt around Peel Castle. So people believe that anyone who sees the dog will die soon after the encounter. And the most famous story to do with this is that when the castle was inhabited, the black dog, who apparently looks like a large spaniel, was often seen walking down the corridor to the guards' room. So the guards would sleep in this room at night and then lock up in the morning and return the key to the man in charge. and they would never do this alone because of this ominous black dog that would walk into the guards' room every evening, curl up by the fire and go to sleep. And so they all got used to this and paid no attention until one night one guard who was in his cups snatched up the keys and said he was going to return them on his own and no one was to go with him. So he goes off down the corridor, and then the dog gets up and follows him. And then they hear this sort of commotion in the corridor, and the man returns, and he returns shaking and unable to speak, and he never properly regains consciousness, and he dies 3 days later. In Jersey, the black dog of Bully, the chien de boulet, my pronunciation isn't good, tells of a phantom dog whose appearance warns of storms. Le Chien de Boulet is described as a monstrous black hound with eyes the size of saucers, and in some versions of the legend, a chain that drags behind it, the sound of which is often heard as a warning to victims of its presence. It then apparently chases them in a circle to terrify them, and no bodily harm's ever done, but they're often found in a state of shock. Though this has a backstory where the real reason is supposedly due to smugglers. If the superstition was fed and became real to the locals, then they would not go to the bay at night and smuggling could continue unabated. There's still a local pub there called the Black Dog. So in Lancashire, there are so many names for this one. The Barghest, Grim, Gytrash, Padfoot, Shag, Shrike, Striker, and Trash. And it's often described as a massive goblin dog with huge teeth and claws. The Skriker of Lancashire and Yorkshire is a death omen, like many other of its type, but it also wanders invisibly in the woods at night, uttering loud, piercing shrieks. Could that be a fox? Just putting that out there. It may also take visible form as a large black dog with enormous, broad, sometimes backward-pointing feet that make a splashing noise like old shoes walking in soft mud, which is specific. And that's why it's sometimes known as trash, which is another word for trudge or slog. In Lincolnshire, there are many tales of ghostly black dogs. A lot of them we get from Ethel Rudkin in her 1938 publication, Folklore. One of them is known locally as Hairy Jack, and he's said to haunt the fields and village lanes around Hemswell. Rudkin claims to have seen Hairy Jack herself, and she believes that the black dogs of Lincolnshire are mainly of a gentle nature and look upon themselves as a sort of spiritual protector. But Hairy Jack is said to haunt lonely plantations, byways and waste places where if it attacks anyone passing by. So who's right there? So this one's one of my favourites. We're going to be in London. The Black Dog of Newgate has said to haunt Newgate Prison for over 400 years, appearing before executions. If you don't know about Newgate Prison, I'm tempted to do a series on this podcast about various famous prisons. Is it just me that finds them slightly horrifically fascinating? Newgate's one of them, and the really famous one in America, San Quentin. Yeah, so I'm fascinated by San Quentin and I'm fascinated by Newgate. But let's get back to it. Get a bit distracted there. So, according to legend, in 1596, a scholar was sent to prison charged with being a sorcerer. But, unfortunately for him, he arrived at a time of terrible famine throughout the south of England. As you can imagine, the prisons were hit hard by this, and he was killed and eaten by starving prisoners before he even got to trial. The apparition of a black dog was said to appear soon after to stalk the men responsible. It's believed that the sorcerer, out to get his revenge on the cannibals, and they were so terrified that they killed their guards and escaped the prison. But the beast is said to have hunted them down and killed and eaten them wherever they fled. So this black dog has been sighted in and around Newgate over the centuries ever since. especially on evenings before executions. Within the prison, there's once an alleyway called Dead Man's Walk, named because it was the corridor that condemned criminals would walk down on their way to the executions. The names of all the convicts were etched on the walls, and many were buried under the flagstones. So Dead Man's Walk was demolished along with the rest of the prison in 1904, but where it ran is close to Amen Corner, an area attached to St Paul's Cathedral, and part of this court is bounded by what was once the Wall of Newgate, and it's here that the Black Dog of Newgate is seen. So it appears as a shapeless black form, and it glides around the court and nearby streets and slithers along the top of the prison's remaining wall. It gives off a disgusting smell of dead flesh and is often accompanied by the sound of dragging footsteps, which is a noise reminiscent of prisoners trudging to their deaths. So, Norfolk, this is where apart from The Hound of the Baskervilles and an Agatha Christie short story called The Hound of Death, this was my first real look at black dogs in folklore. In Norfolk, Suffolk, Lincolnshire, and in northern parts of Essex, a black dog known as Black Shuk or Old Shuk is regarded as malevolent, with stories ranging from it terrifying people or killing them outright, to being a portent of death to anyone who sees it or someone who is close to that person. In some stories, he's amphibious, though, most dogs can swim quite well. And in some, he is a cyclops. There are many tales, and in 1577 he apparently attacked a church in the market town of Bungay and killed 2 people, and then appeared in a nearby church in the village of Blythburgh, taking the lives of another 3 and leaving claw marks on the door, which you can see today. In the parish of Overstrand is a lane known as Shuk's Lane from his frequent appearances there, and apparently you can find scorch marks and the smell of brimstone there, so obviously they believe it's linked to the devil. So there's also less common tales of a similar dog that supposedly accompanies people on their way home in the role of protector rather than an omen of misfortune. The name Shuk is derived from a provincial word meaning shaggy, so it's not as ominous as it sounds. But I married into a Norfolk family, and my father-in-law was the first person to tell me the story of Black Shuk. When he was a teenager, he went on a long walk on the North Norfolk coast with his family, and at dusk they arrived back at the car park and piled in 2 cars to go back to the old rectory where his parents, Roy and Billa, lived. My father-in-law, Dom, was in the rear car with his mother, and Roy and Dom's brother Henry were in the car in the front. And on the drive home, my father-in-law and his mother in the car behind were startled and nearly drove off the road when they came face to face with a man running at full speed down the road. This was the pre-jogging era, and he was wearing smart, slightly old-fashioned clothes and looked absolutely terrified. On arrival home, Billa said to her husband, "Did you see that man running?" And Roy and his son Henry said, "What man?" They never saw any man. And so Billa said that he must have run over a hedge or through a hedge, and that she believed that he was running from Black Shuk. The cars were literally a few seconds behind each other, so there's no way that the car in front could have seen this, and my father-in-law was convinced that he was running from Black Shuk. So Staffordshire, where my father is from, has the Hednesford Hellhound and the Slitting Mill Bastard, if you'll pardon the expression, which is described as a big muscular dog with pointed ears and eyes that look like they're glowing, and this was a big place for research in the 70s when there were lots of sightings of it. The Galley Trot is in Suffolk, and it's noted for not being black, but otherwise it pretty much fits the bill. It's a large white dog with shadowy or indeterminate outline, and it will chase anyone who runs away from it. And the word is derived from galley, which means to frighten. In Surrey, Betchworth Castle is supposed to be haunted by a black dog that prowls the ruins at night, which I can imagine if you look at, I'll put up photos of Betchworth Castle because it is properly overgrown with ruins, and you can imagine a shadowy black dog. In Wiltshire, there's loads of references to the black dog. There's pubs, very good pub, Black Dog Hill and Black Dog Holt Railway. And there are two stories associated with these. One is that a woman in Dilton Marsh had two suitors who agreed to fight a duel to win her hand. One was shot dead, and his dog attacked and killed the other. The woman was so distressed that she took her own life and was buried at Dead Maid's Crossroad. And the black dog wanders the local woods, appropriately called Black Dog Woods. And the other story has a highwayman working the lanes on what is now called Black Dog Hill, which is the A36. And he had apparently trained his dog to jump up and attack the driver of the stagecoach so the vehicle would be halted and he could get on with his robbing. What you never find out, though, is it chicken or the egg? Was it already called Black Dog Woods by someone and then sightings of the black dog started to happen? So in Yorkshire, in Wakefield, Leeds and Pudsey and some areas of Bradford, the local version of the legend is known as Padfoot. It's a death omen, obviously. It may become visible or it may be invisible, and it exhibits certain characteristics that have given it its name. It's said to follow people around with the light padding of its paws and then appearing again in front of them or to the side. It can utter a roar unlike the voice of any known animal, and sometimes it trails a chain. It's best to leave this creature alone. If anyone tries to speak to it or attack it, it will overpower them. One story tells of a man who tried to kick the Padfoot and found himself dragged by it through a hedge and ditch all the way to his home and left under his own window. Although usually described as black, another tale concerns a man who encountered a white Padfoot and he attempted to strike it with his stick, but it passed completely through and he ran home in fear and soon after fell sick and died. Ivelet Bridge in Swaledale is where a headless dog leaps over the bridge into the river, and it can be heard barking at night, although I don't know how you'd differentiate between that and just your neighbour that has too many dogs, like me. It's a death omen, and anyone who sees it will die within a year, but the last sighting of it was over 100 years ago. So the Barguest is said to roam the side roads of York and has seen near Clifford's Tower preying on passers-by, a particularly ominous, monstrous black dog with red eyes, and in some tellings it is a shapeshifter. Some say it's accompanied by the sound of a dragging chain, and the Barguest heralds death. If it lays down on the threshold of your house, it's a sign that you're going to die. It's believed that if you disturb the dog, it will gouge you with its claws, leaving wounds that will never heal. So in Scotland, we have the Muckle Black type, which is a black dog that presides at the witch's Sabbath and is supposed to be the devil himself. And in the village of Merthley, I'm probably not saying that right, is a standing stone. And it said that the person brave enough to move it will find a chest guarded by a black dog. In Wales, the black dog is the Gwillig, or dog of darkness, a frightful apparition of a mastiff with baleful breath and blazing red eyes. And there's another ghostly black dog that's supposed to accompany a witch. They're not all bad, though. There are some good dogs. From the Isle of Man, there's a tale of a guardian black dog that's prevented the deaths of several men. A fishing boat was waiting in Peel Harbour for its skipper to command the crew on a night's fishing. They waited all night, but he never turned up. And in the early morning, a sudden storm sprang up, in which the boat, had it been at sea, would have been lost. When the skipper rejoined his crew, he told them that on his way the night before, he'd been blocked by a great black dog, and whichever way he turned, it stood before him until he finally turned back for home. This one's kind of sinister. Both in England and in Scandinavia, a church grim guards some churches and their churchyards from thieves, vandals, witches and warlocks. For this purpose, it was the custom to bury a dog alive under the cornerstone of a church as a foundation sacrifice. Doesn't sound hugely Christian to me. I mean, I know I studied gift and sacrifice in my degree, but honestly, as a dog lover, I'm not up for burying dogs alive. Sometimes the grim will toll the bells at midnight before the death of a local resident, amazing use of its paws there. And at funerals, the presiding clergyman may see the dog looking out from the church tower and determine from its face whether the soul of the departed is bound for heaven or hell. Another tradition states that when a new churchyard was opened, the first man buried there had to guard it against the devil, and that's why, to save a human soul from such a duty, a black dog is buried on the north part of the church as a substitute. Guardian black dogs refer to those that are neither omens of death or causes of death, but they are a guide to lost travellers and protect them from dangers. Stories of this type become more widespread starting around the early 1900s. In different versions, there's a man journeying along a lonely forest road at night when a large black dog appears at his side and remained there until he left the forest. On his return journey through the wood, the dog reappeared and did the same as before. And years later, 2 convicted prisoners told the chaplain that they would have robbed and murdered a wayfarer in the forest that night, but were intimidated by the presence of his large black dog. The Gert dog, Great Dog of Somerset, is another benevolent dog, and it's said that the mothers would allow their children to play unsupervised in the hills because they believed the Gert dog would protect them. And it was another dog that would accompany lone travellers and act as a protector and guide. So, I'm sorry that my voice has deteriorated. I've still got a cold. Week 1 billion of still having a cold. But that is just some of the black dogs of folklore, partly rescued from my old computer. I definitely think that the black dog I live with is probably some sort of herald of bad luck, but he's sweet anyway, so I think I'll keep him. And he may well, we go jogging together at night, so maybe he does protect me and keep me safe. I know he definitely hates strange men, so that's a bonus of living in London. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, it would be lovely if you would leave a review wherever you can. It makes a huge difference as well as if you subscribe to the podcast. It means it gets shown to more people. And I love, love, love listener suggestions. It always gives me something new and exciting or something I haven't thought about to look into. So do email us at themondaynightrevue@gmail.com or send me a message or a message to The Monday Night Review on Facebook and Instagram, where I will put up black dog photos for you to have a look at. And until next time, stay safe, be kind, and always check the back seat before you drive.